Hey BC, so by far the most viewed and commented on video on my channel is the video where I showed off the big stereo here. And that was done 2 years ago, and I just wanted to do a quick video on what's changed and also have a little bit of commentary on the end that encompasses some of my thoughts on audio. Obviously, in the vinyl community, we're here to talk about music, but stereo systems are a part of that, and they're a way for the music to reach us, and they're the science of how we develop a connection with our music. So I enjoy talking about audio equipment and stereos and general audiophile nonsense because it is the means to an end. So very quickly, I thought a lot of people would enjoy it if I took you guys through some of the changes. A lot of the stereo is the same as what you saw 2 years ago, but a few things are different, and so I wanted to kind of go through those and my reasons behind making those changes. So here we go. Hey guys, so as you can see, by and large, the stereo is very much the same as it was last time you saw it, but there are a few things that are different, so let me go through them. So you'll notice, the Dynaudios are still there, the vintage Mac amps are still there, same CD player, same VPI Scout turntable. One major thing that is different, though, is the cartridge. So as you may remember, I had a Dynavector 10X5 on there, which is Dynavector's entry-level high-output moving coil. And this is the Dynavector, let's see if it'll focus there. Maybe not, 20X2, low-output moving coil cart. This was a big step up, and I don't regret going this route at all. I did get the cart on sale, so no regrets there. And it's just a huge step up in resolution, especially upper octave resolution. Really magical now, and just in general, I would argue that things are a lot more defined with this cart. No big tonal shifts, but just a lot more definition and a lot better rhythmic accuracy. That was just what I heard listening. Just my own off-the-cuff thoughts. So I love this cart to death, and it will probably be the cart that stays on this table for a very, 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 very long time. And so because that is a low output moving coil cart, you cannot use the built-in phono on the Macintosh preamp. I had to get a separate moving coil phono preamplifier, and that is the iFi iPhono 2. Can't really see it there; it's kind of dimly lit, but that's the moving coil preamp I've been using. It's an excellent preamp for the money. A bunch of reviewers have kind of raved about these iPhono preamps. This is the iPhono 2, the upgraded version of the original iPhono. This thing is a Swiss Army knife moving coil preamp. I mean, it has every single gain setting you could possibly want. It sounds incredible. I've heard people compare this preamp to, Phono preamps costing like 3 or 4 times its value. So I think it's a steal. I really enjoy it. I did both upgrades together, so I couldn't really isolate. The differences I was hearing, I don't know how much to attribute to the cart and how much to attribute to the Phono preamp. But I like the combination of the two a lot. I think they work really well together. So as far as gear goes, those are really the only 2 upgrades, but there's some other upgrades in the system that I wanted to talk about. And I know I'm stepping into murky territory here, so bear with me. So one of the bigger changes is, I don't know if you can see these here, the new speaker cables, which are Kimber Cable 8TC speaker cables. I've had these for about a year now, and I love these cables. And before everyone jumps down my throat, it's just what I like. This is I felt I was able to demo this cable before I bought it. I was able to use it in the system for a couple days. I was able to have friends over who were familiar with my system and see if they heard a difference. And the difference to me was not subtle. I was going from Blue Jean Belden speaker cables, which were great cables for the money. I mean, really excellent cables, but I've invested enough time and money in this system that I really felt that a decent, well-made, mid-priced cable from a company like Kimber or Nordist or something like that was what this system deserved. I demoed a couple cables. I demoed some AudioQuest, I demoed the Kimber, and I demoed some Nordist. And to my ears, the Kimber were the biggest improvement, and I liked the tonal balance of the Kimber, which was very, very, very neutral to my ears. So this is what worked in my system, and this is what gave my system a little bit of an increase in performance to my ears. And that was the biggest cable change. I mean, these were the biggest step up. These are very nice speaker cables, and probably the last speaker cables I'll buy. I did also change out the interconnects. I'm not going to kind of go back there, but so going from so I still have the VPI phono cable going to the preamp. So it's the same VPI phono cable. VPI's phono cable is made from the same cable material they wire their tone arm with. So to me, that just made sense to continue the signal path. I want as many things the same in the signal path as possible, just because that makes sense to do. And then so going from the Phono Preamp to the preamp, I have some really basic entry level transparent audio, the link interconnects, just transparent audio 1 meter interconnects. They're nothing fancy. They're not high end cables by any means. They're pretty much the entry level that transparent audio makes, but I've been enjoying them a lot, and I actually installed these after I installed the Kimbers. So I was just using standard interconnects, really, not standard, but like very low cost interconnects in this phono to preamp and preamp to amplifier. I was using what was I using? I was using the cable that came with the iFi, and I was also using a Moro, like a $60 Moro audio interconnect going to the amp. So I changed out those and I put 2 transparent audio interconnects in, and I've been really liking these. I didn't really notice a tonal shift, and the definition was about the same. However, to my ears, what I was hearing was actually a little bit better sound staging. I was seeing I was hearing more of a holographic image with these cables, and that's just what I've heard. And actually, they're pretty new. They're still getting broken in, so maybe they'll change even more. But that's just general observations based on listening, based on my experience with this gear at this point. So I just wanted to share that with everyone. So yeah, VC, that was just a rundown of the changes that have occurred to the system over the last 2 years. And now I have to kind of conclude with a rant, I guess, because I talked about the forbidden thing that no one in the YouTube audio community is allowed to talk about. Cables. I said the C word, guys. And, I'm anticipating the comments on this, because I got in my last video, in the video on gear, like in a couple seconds of the video, I mentioned, I'd like to get better cables for this system someday. And based on just saying that, I got hundreds of pretty terrible and rude comments talking about how I was delusional for thinking of cables, how I was delusional for buying into the concept of better audio cables. I calling me names, calling other people names. And obviously I don't put up with that anymore. If you come into the comment section spouting hateful rhetoric, you're gone. So no discussion there. Don't even bother. But if you want to have a discussion, that's different. If you want to have a respectful discussion about cables, fine by me. I welcome it. So obviously, through my listening, I firmly believe that cables are somewhat important. They are a good finishing component to a system. I think they can increase performance. I've heard this. I have swapped out cables and done extensive long listening tests. And people said, you have confirmation bias, and you don't do the switching. Well, first of all, the switching technique is scientifically, statistically not good. I mean, I understand a little bit about peer-reviewed research, and I understand that the experiments that have done with a switching box are incredibly flawed from an ethical standpoint. I mean, first you have the whole signal path with the switching box, and then you have this idea of, when we're listening to audio, do we want to make judgments about audio through, long-term, long-period listening, which is, that's very much what I believe. I believe, to understand the sonic characteristics of a system, it takes a while. It takes a couple records. It takes maybe an afternoon of listening. And if you switch back and forth between settings, you're going to pick what your subconscious is going to tell you it likes better just from that quick switching is well, first of all, statistically it's been proven that in any audio shootout, the listener will always in a quick succession audio shootout, the listener will always pick what they perceive to be the loudest of the two examples. So it doesn't matter how good it is, how refined it is, how detailed it is, how nuanced it is. They're just going to pick what's louder, because in that short amount of time, that's what the brain is automatically going to go to. So I have a problem with people and philosophies that view those short window experiments that are really just snapshots, that view them with this kind of reverence, and that every other experience people have had with audio is wrong. To me, that's unethical. So I when testing out if something is effective in reproducing audio and improving audio signal and improving your listening experience, I definitely believe that you have to spend time with it. Before I bought cables, I spent about a week each with each of the cables that I demoed. It was, and I switched out cables. I had friends over that had heard my system before, and I would switch out cables, and I would not tell them which cable I was using. And everyone liked the Kimber. Everyone really liked the Kimber, including myself. So, people were able to articulate it. I mean, I heard better definition all around, but especially the mid bass. It really cleaned up my mid bass. It's not to say that the mid bass sounded bad before. It's just I heard an improvement. I heard better engagement. And like all audio equipment, it's a personal thing. People like different amps. People like the sonic signatures of different amps. People like the sonic signatures of different turntables. I mean, the two turntables I own are worlds apart in terms of how they sound. I mean, the Riga is a fast, energetic turntable that does rhythm really well, and the VPI will plumb the depths of bass. I mean, it really will, and present things really tonally crisp and realistic. They're two different sounding turntables. I like them both, but it's, it just goes to show everything in audio is a personal preference. And we should really be doing what we think works for us. So I will never criticize anyone for using cables that they like, whether they be Monster cable, whether they be, bare wire Blue Jean cables, which I think are great cables. I think for the money, you can't get better cables than the Blue Jean cables. But at the same time, I don't think we should criticize people who, have, if you've got somewhat of a more expensive system that you put a lot of time and money into, to me, it doesn't really make sense to round that out with zip cord, when you could be getting a couple extra percentage points of performance. And to me, that's what I hear with cables. They're a nice way to finish off a system. Of course, there are plenty of naysayers, but I find those naysayers often haven't really done the real-time listening to this stuff. Because on paper, cables don't make sense. On paper, they don't make sense. But you know what also? Amps don't make sense on paper. Have you ever heard an amp that's perfect on paper? They used to make them in the 80s. They sound horrible. There's some amps that statistically that have all the right noise distortion rates and dampening rates and everything. On paper, looks amazing. And you know what? No one wants those amps today. I try not to quote Michael Fremer too much, but he did say one thing that's really important and really stuck with me. Audio is an illusion. So this idea of accuracy is kind of false. It's a false notion of accuracy. We're not recreating something, because a studio is not a live environment. A studio is not a performance. A studio is the creation of an illusion, especially in rock music, more so than classical. In rock music, the studio is a creation of an illusion. They're playing in dead rooms with microphones that add all these things, and mixing boards and everything that adds all these things to imitate live performance. So in the system should be doing that too. It's helping to create the illusion of musical performance. So that's what I think audio gear should do. So this idea of statistical accuracy, both in amps and, a lot of people who are proponents of digital argue for the statistical perfection of digital. I think you should trust your ears. As a performing, working musician, I'm just inclined to trust my ears. And if I hear the improvement to justify the expense of something like, slightly nicer speaker cables, to me that was justified because it gives me greater enjoyment in my system. And I accept the fact that for a lot of people, that isn't justified. And that's okay. But I think what's not okay is to have this kind of holier than thou attitude. I don't believe in speaker cables, so I'm smarter than you. You're an idiot because you're using these high dollar speaker cables or these high dollar interconnects. And they all use the same word. They all say snake oil. It's certain people who read way too many hobbyist forums and think they can shove their opinions down everyone else's throat. So I just felt I needed to say something about that. That it's fine to be skeptical about certain equipment making a difference, but the correct way to go about that is to saying, I haven't experienced this, I haven't heard this. To me, the cost isn't justified. I think that's a more acceptable position than saying, you're a blithering idiot because you heard this and you're just kidding yourself because you couldn't have possibly heard this. I don't pull out the credential book that much, but I have 2 degrees in music and I play in a full orchestra in a live setting, a couple times a week. I like to think my ears work okay. I like to think I know how to trust my ears, and I like to think I know what is a more realistic experience to the live thing. And if I make a decision in the stereo that brings me closer to a realistic experience, like I know what a symphony orchestra is supposed to sound like in a hall. I've heard live orchestras in dozens and dozens of halls throughout North America. I know what it's supposed to sound like, and I know when I hear a convincing musical line. And I try to make choices based on listening that get me closer to that. And for me, going to Kimber cable got me closer to that. Going to these transparent interconnects got me a little closer to that. It wasn't a huge difference. I'm not saying it was like the difference of like switching amps or switching cartridges. The components in your system still have an order of importance. Switching out speaker cables or switching out interconnects is not going to be as big of a difference as switching out a preamp. They're not miracles. They're not little winded chords of miracles. They're just ways of getting information across, and some companies have developed techniques that seem to make that better or worse, depending on what it is. I've heard some cables that I really don't like, that tonally I do not like. I'm not going to name names, but because they may sound great in other people's systems, but I demoed some cables that I did not think were an improvement. So I think it's system dependent, and I think people need to trust their ears, and that's my philosophy about cables. People need to trust their ears and not necessarily jump to conclusions based on articles they read on the internet. Because I think if more people listened with their ears, audio would be a much more peaceful place. So I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me on that, just because that was the single most contentious point I even touched on in the last gear video. And I don't want to make this a channel about gear, but I think gear is a part of our musical experience. So I just want to share what I enjoy, what works for me. And if other people, don't appreciate the way I look at it, that's okay. You don't have to. You don't have to have my philosophy on gear. But I think we all need to respect each other's listening experiences a little bit more, and I think we need to respect each other's opinions when it comes to what works for them. I think that's all really I can say about that. I don't want to go on a very long rant. I think I said all I need to say. But I hope you enjoyed just a little bit of some of the tweaks I made to the system. It's really great right now, and I'm enjoying it immensely. I love when I'm able to come back for the holidays and listen to this system with family. It's a privilege every time. So thanks for bearing with me on another tour. I hope to get some more videos up in the spring. I was really lagging behind this fall just because I was in a new environment. I was working a ton, but I appreciate the continued subscriber increase, and I appreciate the friendly comments, and I appreciate all you guys out there in the VC. You've made this a really great community. So cheers for 2018 VC.